What's up everybody? Yeti has just released the new LTE and today we're gonna take a first look, hit the trails and go for a ride. Let's check it out. Now, some of you out there might be familiar with a 160 millimeter full power e-bike from Yeti, which was the 160e. What is the LTE and what makes it different? Well, I'd say just about everything. Aside from the Sixfinity suspension platform, which we'll get into a little later. However, the kinematics have been tuned and modified, and I'm very happy about that, but we'll save that for later. So, other things that make this bike different. First of all, geometry has been changed, kind of keeping in line with trends. Yeti has given this bike a 5 millimeter longer reach than that 160e. Stack heights have continued to increase across their line. Suspension kinematics, which I said we'll get into later, got the lowest anti-squat of any Yeti bike out on the market, which we're really happy about. You've got the ability to run 29 or 27.5-inch wheels while maintaining optimized geometry with a flip chip. You've got a 3-position leverage rate chip, which will change the bike from 25, 30 to 35%. So it will give you 3 different settings. Yeti calls those settings racy and consistent, balanced ride, or plush and poppy, depending on where you select it. So far for our testing, we've been riding the bike in the middle, which is the balanced ride. And I gotta say, compared to the 160e, I'm quite a bit happier with it. Could be part of the kinematic change, but it also could be this new updated Fox shock. Other notable differences, of course, the Bosch CX Gen 5 drive unit. Our model here, which is the top of the line model, has the CXR race equipped motor, and the other 2 models below it have the CX drive unit. You've got the option to run the included 800 watt-hour battery, or if you're looking to save 900 grams of weight, you can opt for a 600 watt-hour battery. It is also compatible with a Power More range extender, and I believe a 200 millimeter cord to get that up and running for truly big epics in the mountains. Other evolutionary upgrades to the LTE frame include Yeti's use of Vectran. That is a multi-filament ply similar to a Kevlar, which is applied to high-risk areas, you could call them, down tube, top tube, the outside of the seat stay and the chain stay, just to add some durability and impact protection. It's something that they were using on athletes' bikes like their dirt jumper and DH bike projects, and they have been rolling that out into some of their newer aggressive bikes, and it's something that we're happy to see, and I'm sure anyone who else has damaged or cracked a carbon frame from dropping it on a sharp rock will also be happy to see. Yeti have also improved cable management. As you can see here, we've got our side port plugged as we're running wireless access. However, you've got what Yeti calls a rattle-free cable port management system on both sides. So far, it's living up to the test, and it has been a rattle-free and very quiet bike. Here on the top tube, you've got a nicely integrated Bosch Kiox 400C colorized display, which will give you anything from the most simple to some rather complex and nerdy numbers and statistics if you're looking for that sort of integration into your e-bike riding experience. Moving down low to the rear end, we've got a nice integrated mud guard out back, which is going to help prevent debris, mud, grit, etc. from coming in and affecting that linkage, and a nicely integrated down tube motor guard, which doubles as a removal port to get that battery to slide out easily. And another small but really nice integration is the chain guide here. Mounted right to the frame, does a great job keeping that chain on no matter how rough or rowdy the trails get. And speaking of rough and rowdy trails, I think it's time to hop on this bike and get down to the next spot. So what is Sixfinity? It is the evolution of Yeti's Switch Infinity platform that they have optimized and they believe is better suited for the e-bike application. It is a 6-bar suspension platform, and they are able to tune each of those 6 bars for various aspects of the rear suspension. So that is anti-rise, anti-squat, pedaling forces, braking forces, suspension impacts. So they have spent a lot of time really tuning and optimizing each of those 6 bars and how it works as a package as a whole. Now, this came out a couple years ago. We'll link to a video we actually made quite a few years back when Yeti released their first e-bike, which was the 160e. And we sat down and talked to Stretch, who nerded out big time and talked all about it. So check that out if you want to learn more about the Sixfinity. Now, as I briefly mentioned earlier, this bike has got some different numbers from Yeti bikes in the past, and specifically comparing it to like the recently released MTE, which is a mid-power drive unit, and a lot of other Yeti bikes, which I would say are on the firmer, more platformy, pedal efficiency side of the spectrum for my taste. I am a downhill descending focused rider, and I always prefer bikes that are biased more towards the descending side of things for just rough, chunky, deserty terrain that I like to ride so much. Now, with a big, powerful motor, Yeti has decided maybe we should make this bike a little more plush, smooth, and comfortable. So again, this bike's got some of the lowest anti-squat numbers of any bike that they've ever created. And that's something that translates to in the seat comfort on long days out on the trail, as well as suppleness and sensitivity on kind of the rough, chundery, and just loose terrain where you want traction, but you also need that tire to just kind of absorb the impacts rather than bounce and keep you kind of floating on top. So I personally am a fan. So far, again, this is, a tech check, first look video, not a long-term review. Haven't had the time to really experiment with all the different linkage positions. I'm really happy so far in that middle position. And that was not the case on the 160e. I struggled a bit more. You folks might remember in that review, I thought that unless you really rode that bike super hard and were mashing into stuff, it had a tendency to kind of tire you out and be a little bit firmer and stiffer than I personally liked. This bike, again, could be kinematics, also could be the new shock. That is reduced. It's a much more comfortable bike, and I'm really happy with it so far. I look forward to playing around with the suspension linkage chips, as well as volume reducers in the shock to really see how this bike can be optimized even greater. But so far, I'm really happy, and if there weren't any other chips to adjust, I'd still feel pretty stoked on how this bike rides. So moving into anti-rise, they've got a pretty linear curve that hovers in the mid 60s. I think it's like 62%, start and end, and right at sag, I think it's around 67%. And that is what Yeti believed was a good balance to maintain the bike's geometry. When you're under the brakes really hard, you're not getting that stink bug effect or squatting down. However, it also keeps the rear end a bit more active and lively so that rear suspension is working when you're getting on the brakes. One last quick thing regarding suspension before we move on. Yeti has just released a suspension calculator, which I am very impressed with. It takes rider weight, bike model, and will give you some really great start settings. Now, again, everybody's got their own personal preferences, but what's cool is that it gives you like an air pressure window for your spring rate, but it also, more importantly, gives you an ideal number for your sag, which is 19.5 millimeters out of that rear shock. So more importantly than just like starting with an air pressure and not knowing where you're supposed to be, I really like the fact that they say 19.5 millimeters is what you want out of sag. I was pretty spot on. I actually had been riding the bike for several days before I used the suspension calculator, and I was pretty pleasantly surprised to find that my air pressure was like right within the window, and I actually was only one click off on that rear shock from what their suggested settings were, which again makes sense for personal preference in terrain. But just the fact that I spent a couple days on the bike and ended up where they said that I should be based on my weight shows that there's quite a lot of effort and time put into the database on the back end to give riders a good head start for making a bike feel good, quick, and without a lot of headache. So available models and first impressions. Yeti will be offering 3 different builds: the C3, the T3, and the T4, which is the top of the line spec here. All of the bikes will have SRAM drivetrain. The C3 will have a cable run drivetrain. The other 2 will have Axis equipped drivetrain. All of the bikes have SRAM Maven brakes of various levels. They all come with the 800 watt-hour battery, and the T model bikes come with the new updated Fox rear shock, and of course the T4, being the flagship, has the Podium up front. So pricing as of now, We just found out that pricing unfortunately had to increase. So 10.3 to 14.9 is the range right now. Who knows what will happen with those numbers, but that's where things sit right now. Now let's talk about how the bike rides. I gotta say, first impressions so far, I'm really pleased with this bike. There's not a whole lot I would change about it. The 64-degree head tube angle, 78-degree effective seat tube angle for me at 5'11", not having overly long legs. I'm happy with those numbers. I like the reach at 485. You know, you've got the ZS 4456 that is notched or has indicators, so you can run adjustable headsets if you would like to further tweak and tune your geo there. I'm running it in the full 29. I'm happy with it there. I think I will be keeping it that way. Unless you guys really want me to experiment with a mullet, I'm happy to do that. But so far, I'm more excited about playing with the suspension, putting it in the linear and adding more volume reducers, doing the opposite, but putting it in the progressive, and of course, just riding it in that middle setting, which is delivering me a really impressive ride so far. And again, to be clear, this is not a long-term review. You know, this is kind of a first look informational video that we are making with Yeti, so I don't want to confuse anyone there. This is not a paid or official endorsement, but an informational first look. That being said, I've got quite a few rides and miles on this bike, and I'm very happy with it so far. Some of you are probably going to ask, if this bike was in your e-bike shootout a few months back, where would it land? I can't say that yet. I just don't have enough time and miles on it, and we haven't passed it around to the crew enough. What I can say right now, based on the amount of time I have on the bike, it would be pretty high on my list of bikes. I would say that it would be a competitor for sure top 5, maybe top 4, top 3. I'm really digging it, I gotta say. And the last Gen 160E, you know, might remember the review if you guys watched it or have been around that long. It was fine. It was a good bike. It wasn't a bike for me, but I couldn't deny that it was a good bike. This I like a lot better right off the get-go. Much easier to tune, much easier to set up. You know, and that's not even getting into all the Bosch stuff, right? To me, an electric mountain bike is mountain bike first and E second. So I always focus on how the mountain bike aspect of it performs first, because any motor is going to get me up the hill better than my old legs. So yeah, that's why I like to prioritize the mountain bike performance first. And to me, the mountain bike performance on this LTE is for sure a step above the 160E, and honestly is pretty impressive compared to a lot of other bikes out on the market. I like the balanced feel of it. Sure, they don't have size specific chainstays. Maybe that's okay for me at 5'11" and sitting on a large. That maybe for an extra large or a small rider, that's not going to be ideal, but I guess that's what is a benefit of being right in the middle of that bell curve. Would I like adjustable chainstays? Yeah, I guess maybe. Would I use them a lot? Probably not, because like I said, I'm pretty stoked on how the bike rides and feels right now. And all the adjustability in the world doesn't really matter if you never have to use it, because the bike is really well thought out from the get-go. And that's kind of, I think, where, like the Specialized Levo, for example, amazing amount of adjustability. 90% of the time, I don't touch it from the stock position, right? It just is a really good bike, and it's a really balanced neutral machine. And I feel like that this bike kind of sits in that category. 160, 170 mil. It's, for me, kind of a great do-it-all bike so far. I'm excited to put a lot more miles on it. I'm excited to get it to the rest of the guys, to have them ride it and see if they're on board and feel the same way about this thing. So there you have it, folks. If you have any questions, things that you would like us to focus on for the long-term review in the future, feel free, let us know. We'd be happy to hear, compare it to other bikes that you're interested in, or do any weird experimentation that you think would be interesting or help you in your research quest for your next bike. As long as you got 15 grand to spend, I guess, right? All right. You can get away with 10 grand if you buy the low end spec. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for lots more videos, and we'll see you out on the trails.